I believe that God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure.
Alrighty, does that ring a bell for anybody? Anyone know the movie that's from? You got it. Chariots of Fire. So in this movie, the hero, Eric Liddell, is a Scottish middle distance runner and also a Christian man. And because of that, he gets in a jam when the Olympic finals are scheduled for a Sunday, and he can't run on Sunday, so what to do? Now, my pal Olga Kotelko loved this movie, and she loved this quote, "God made me fast, and when I run, I feel His pleasure." She loved it partly because it's exactly the way she felt herself. Now, Olga was a tremendous machine. You remember the way they used to describe secretariat? Somehow it's fitting for her. She was a tremendous machine, and she knew it, and she wasn't about to take the credit for it, or even, all of it, or even most of it. Now, before I go further, it occurs to me I shouldn't assume that everyone here knows who Olga Kotelko is, or was. I'm still not quite used to talking about her in the past tense. Olga died very suddenly last May. She was a retired school teacher from West Van who took up track and field at age 77 and went on to become one of the best masters track athletes ever. So here she is, the big reveal. There she is. Now, a lot of people think that this image is photoshopped, especially when you tell them that Olga is 91 years old in that picture. Now, I said Olga was one of the best ever, and I think now we should lose the equivocation. She was the best ever by the numbers. She set more than 50 world records in her age categories, and a lot of them by huge margins. Olga did things no masters track athlete had ever done before, including the number of events that she competed in. Beyond age 75 or so, if you know anything about these masters track meets, people tend to go in maybe one or two. You kind of specialize, one event, maybe two. Olga competed in 11, which caused all kinds of scheduling problems, because often she was supposed to be doing high jump over here and long jump over here, and sometimes across town doing, 100-meter dash, drove everybody crazy. Now, the question everyone has when they see this picture, or if they were lucky enough to have seen Olga doing her thing live, is how is that even possible? How can somebody that old have those kind of jets and those kind of springs? What kind of freak of nature, freak of genetics are we talking about here? And I was interested in those questions too, and so were a lot of scientists. And so actually was Olga herself. I'll tell you, the day this whole project got off the ground, this book project that she and I did together, I remember I was sitting in her kitchen watching her glide around making tea, and the way she moved, it was like somebody in the prime of life. And I said, "Olga, how old do you feel?" And she thought about that, and she went, "How old do I feel? 50? And then she said, "No, maybe a bit less. I have more energy now than I did at 50. 50. She was 90 at this point. And I said, "What do you think's going on?" And she said, "I don't know. It's a mystery even to me." And that's all it took. That was the beginning for Olga and me. At that point, I'd been planning to write a magazine article about her, a whimsical little human interest story. But pretty much in that moment, in her kitchen, I knew that we had something way bigger on our hands. This was the story of human aging, told through someone who seemed to be defying the rules. So Olga agreed to be a guinea pig in the biggest science project of her life, actually of both of our lives. And I didn't have to twist her arm, to be poked and prodded and interviewed and brain scanned and cooed and coddled over by scandalously handsome young scientists in labs all over North America. This was Olga's idea of fun. And so here we are 5.5 years later, and the project became a book. This one here. What makes Olga run? And if you're thinking, okay, what's the answer? Tell me now. What does make Olga run? I'm tempted to say you have to read the book, which is one way of saying that there is no elevator answer for that. But I will say that to dismiss Olga as a freak of nature is to grossly misrepresent her successes. For one thing, if you look at her family history, which is what the first thing a doctor would do to try to figure out why this person's living so long or not, if you look at her family history, she didn't come from a long line of Methuselahs. You know, her parents weren't particularly long-lived, her grandparents weren't particularly long-lived, and her 10 siblings, she outlived all of them by a wide margin. Genetic tests, which we had done, revealed that she'd been dealt a good hand, but not a spectacular one. Nothing in her DNA, at least as far as we know how to read DNA right now, which is still pretty crude science, nothing in her DNA explains what she became, a sort of super granny. I often say Olga was one of the healthiest people I ever met, healthy in every way there is to be healthy. And I firmly believe that while we measured everything we could, you know, scientists sampled her muscle and scanned her brain and peered into her cells to see what kind of shape her mitochondria were in, a big part of her secret lies in things you can't measure nearly as well. This business of healthy aging, you know, we know it's partly about doing the right things, eating better and eating less, getting enough sleep, not sitting too much, managing stress, exercising, what you might call habits of body. But it turns out that it's also about habits of mind, literally thinking the right thoughts and believing the right things and just kind of being the right kind of person. And that psychological dimension is, I believe, the X factor for a lot of the so-called super seniors who are just, you know, blazing with good health despite being really old. They've run between the raindrops of the big 5 diseases and they've escaped all those afflictions that are supposed to lay us low. Olga was a kind of super senior. And as I got to know her better and better, I realized that the most impressive thing about her wasn't her vertical jump or her bench press or her takeoff speed, you know, in the 100-meter dash. That was the stuff that got her all the press. But to my mind, her thing was, it was her mind, it was her attitude. She really believed that everything we know about human limits is bogus. It's received wisdom, you can take it or leave it, and she chose to leave it. Her faith in herself was like a blade. She could cut a path with it. She could carve a whole life trajectory with it. And the big thing, maybe the biggest thing, propping up her faith in herself was her faith. And so this gets us back to where we started, and it's the reason I'm talking here today about Olga in a church. I want to explore a little bit today how faith intersects with performance and longevity. When I say that Olga was helped out by a kind of spiritual tailwind, that's the kind of language that makes some people roll their eyes. You know, it sounds not very scientific. It sounds like a sketchy claim, but really it isn't. It stands on the data. And the more we learn about the depth of the mind-body connection, the stronger the case becomes. Now, I kind of became Olga's shadow for a few years as we researched our book. I followed her around from meet to meet, and in the downtime between her events, I sat down with dozens of other competitors, masters athletes from all over the world, and I'm especially interested in the ones in the upper categories, 70s, 80s, 90s. Technically, you can be a masters athlete at 35, which I think is bogus. You know, you're really starting to, it should be 50 or 55 or 60, but 70, 80, 90, that's where the real juice is. And I asked all these people I spoke to the same question: what makes you run? And I was shocked how many of them flat out said they run for God, just like Eric Liddell, just like Olga, although she wouldn't put it in those terms. And I said, wow, you know, why so much religion in this group? Well, partly, surely it's a function of their age. Older folk are just way more likely to have been raised in a faith than younger folk. But as we know, that can't be all it's about, demographics, because, you know, being raised in a particular spiritual tradition doesn't necessarily mean you'll stick with it, as everybody here knows. You know, people shed the family faith all the time. Half of us UUs are refugees from some other traditional religious upbringing, right? So it's got to be more than that. Something about these guys' faith must be working for them. So let's just look at the performance part for a moment. Having some kind of faith gives you a huge motivational boost. So much so, it's almost an unfair advantage. It's like spiritual doping. You know, you have this reason. It's spiritual development will follow. You have this reason beyond yourself to bring everything that's in you. You know, it's almost as if you have a moral duty to find out what you're capable of. And that gives you an edge over athletes who are only running for themselves, or maybe for, you know, for their moms or their coaches or some terrestrial cheering squad. If you're running for God, you're not going to hold anything back. You're not going to worry about absolutely crushing the other competitors, because it's not about you and them. It's about you and him. Or her. Faith takes ego out of the picture. And that's partly why Olga, who was so sweet off the track, honestly, she was like everybody's favorite grandmother, could toggle over the moment she stepped on the track and become something completely different. She became kind of ruthless. She was easily the most competitive person I've ever met, no question. And it was nothing personal, what she was doing to those people when she smoked them. And everyone who knew her knew that, and they kind of respected it. Now, this faith business, I tried to get Olga to go on the record with some of this, to articulate her faith, you know, where it came from and how it worked and what it meant to her in this context of sports and in the context of life. And she was reluctant to go on the record with this stuff. Partly she knew that you know, a lot of people are put off by God talk. And also, this wasn't really anyone's business. It was a private thing between she and her God. But off the record, she told me, you know, stories from her life and about what happened when she prayed and what happened when she was in a very dark place and she petitioned for her own life. This happened a few times. And I'm telling you, these stories gave me the chills. It was the kind of stuff, you know, that would make Richard Dawkins go, hang on, I gotta make a call. You know, I thought, holy cow, Olga, no wonder you run for God. He pretty clearly has your back. Now, the other part of this faith question, the second half of the double whammy of faith in the lives of these older competitors, is the longevity part. And here the data are crystal clear. I came away from the research thinking, wow, you know, belief is a pretty great tool to have in our kit as we age, whether we're athletes or not. Faith buys you years, good years. People with some sort of belief system are happier, they live longer, they're more likely to survive cancer, they respond better to chemotherapy, the list goes on and on and on. So, how do we make sense of this? Some of you might be thinking, okay, there's a flaw in your logic here. All these benefits, who says it's faith that's causing them? Maybe it's the trappings of having a faith that's driving the health benefits, right? All those good habits that pious people tend to have. Right? You take your average devout Roman Catholic, which is what Olga was. They probably don't smoke, don't drink, don't get into any high-speed car chases with the local constabulary, you know? And that makes them less likely to die early. Fair enough. But the interesting thing is, even if you control for what sociologists call drop-down effects like that, you control for those, faith still makes a difference, pretty big one. So something else is going on. And I should say as an aside that while Olga didn't smoke, she did drink. She liked her scotch quite a bit. And she still drove right to the end, although not in any high-speed chases as far as I know. Now I want to make a distinction here. I say believe in something. Believe in something. I call that one of Olga's 9 rules for living a happy and healthy and long life. Believe in something. But I'm always careful not to use the R word, religion, because I don't think organized religion figures much in the health benefits of belief. Here's what I think is making the bread rise here. There are at least 3 active ingredients. There's other people, an element of community. There's a sense of service, and there's a sense of purpose. And all 3 of those are demonstrably good for us. So let's just break them down one by one. Community. I mean, I don't have to convince any of you about the value of community. Isolation is the #1 health risk. Community is the #1 health tonic. Second ingredient is service. Again, we're right in the you wheelhouse. You know, orienting yourself towards something bigger than yourself is really, really important. In fact, it's so important that when people tell me what I've learned from all this longevity research, what's the secret formula, boil it down for me. I sometimes say, if I want to burn it down as far as I can, exercise and volunteer. That's it. Just do those 2 things and you'll live 6 to 10 years longer and you'll be a lot happier. Exercise and volunteer. Olga did a lot of volunteering, and most of it was connected to her church. Of those who've been given much, much will be demanded. Luke 12:48. Now, the third and final ingredient is somewhat related. I actually think it's the most persuasive reason that faith is good for us, and it's that sense of purpose. Depth, meaning, and purpose. That's our threefold path here in this church. And those three things are kind of separate, but not really. And Stanford psychologist Kelly McGonigal studies this area, and she has a really great money line about this. Chasing meaning is great for your health. It's better for your health than trying to avoid discomfort. Chasing meaning is great for your health. Chasing meaning, trying to find that sweet spot where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. That is rich and difficult and incredibly rewarding work. It's challenging to the soul, I think, in the same way that Olga's running and jumping and throwing things were challenging to her body. It's like spiritual resistance training. It forces an adaptation response. Now again, I've lapsed into that kind of language. It's not very scientific. Whereas like spiritual and soul make the evidence-based tribe crazy. They say, come on, show me the data. Forget that stuff. Show me the data. Okay, here it is. People who pursue meaning are healthier and have stronger immune systems than people who merely pursue fun. Nobody does just that, but people who are tilted that way. One recent study found that people with a strong sense of purpose produce more of an enzyme that protects chromosomes as they divide. So, in effect, having a sense of purpose makes you age more slowly. No one knows for sure why. I think there's a good chance it's connected to stress reduction. If you have a strong feeling that you know why you're here on Earth, doing what you're supposed to be doing, it gives you a feeling of control over events, and that reduces stress, and that's what bolsters the immune system. Again, the scientists are kind of guessing, but the data is clear. Now, the Japanese have a great word for this sense of purpose. It's instantly became my new favorite word when I learned it. It's ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I, ikigai, and it literally means the sense that your life is worth living. And I just wanted to say, just as an aside about, I'm going to take us on the spur line for 20 seconds here. Japan looms large in the story of Olga because she and I, the big thing we were planning before she died was we were going to go to Japan, and we were going to find a woman named Mitsu Morita, who's the only woman on the planet who's kind of Olga's equal, roughly her age, and could almost keep up with her. And we were going to have a friendly race, and we were going to just immerse ourselves in the Japanese culture, because so much about Japan, from its language to its cultural codes to even its diet in certain places, is a template for aging well. Japan is showing us the way forward. We never got a chance. But anyway, this Japanese concept of ikigai, the sense that your life's worth living, Japanese researchers found it's very, very powerful. People who wake up in the morning with a strong belief that they're going to contribute something to the world live longer. Now remember, this is the same thing that Viktor Frankl found. Viktor Frankl, when the Auschwitz survivor and writer, he reported from the death camps that the prisoners who remained alive in there, who made it out of there, were the ones who had a reason to go on living. Somebody was depending on them, somebody was waiting for them, or they felt that destiny itself was kind of waiting for them. Either way, they had unfinished business. So I guess the moral for the rest of us is figure out what your unfinished business is. We're born with sealed orders. That's what Olga believed. Open your envelope. Don't wait till you're 77 years old to do it. Do it now. To be of importance to others is to be alive. That's T.S. Eliot. Olga was living proof that he was right. She came more and more alive the more important she became to others. More alive in her 80s than her 70s, and more alive in her 90s than her 80s. You could see her sense of purpose crystallizing as she grew a little bit famous. She realized that she had the power to change lives just by her example. Here she suddenly was in front of 5 million people on the Today Show. Here she was in front of 33 million people on the cover of Parade magazine. I mean, that's crazy-making exposure for a plain Jane from Sputz, Saskatchewan. Kind of scrambled her brain. Olga was kind enough, or trusted me enough, to show me some of her diary entries from the last year of her life, after all this media stuff was happening for her. And they were like the racing thoughts of a teenage girl. There was excitement and anxiety and gratefulness and confusion all at once. It was like, she's like, why is this happening to me? You know, what does it mean that this is happening to me? She thought, there must be a reason this goofy bald guy came into her life wanting to write a book about her. You know, maybe I was sent. You know, I was sent to tell her that indeed this is what she's meant to be doing with her third act. You know, make it brilliant, get the story out there. Plus which I pulled her into this even bigger project where she basically pledged herself to science. And it was a huge commitment, and it was a hassle, but she could see the long game, so there was never any hesitation. She essentially said to the scientists, do whatever you need to do to me. Poke me, prod me, biopsy me, just make it count. Whatever secrets you unlock, make them available. If someone down the line can benefit from who I am, from what I am, I'm all in. That was her position. Thus do old women plant trees whose shade they will never live to enjoy. Olga was neat. She was so much more than her records. Everyone who didn't know her personally will remember her by her big motor. And everyone who did know her personally will remember her by her big heart. She taught me so many little things, to breathe, to exercise differently, to drink more water, to get more sleep. And this is a big one, to be sure that the on switch is on when it's on and off when it's off. You know, and not sort of half on all the time, which is the way with so many of us. You know, never fully going for it, and yet never really resting. And she taught me one big thing, which is, it's never too late. It's never too late. You know, avenues of possibility aren't shutting down at the rate you think they are. Or maybe this is a better way to say it, a lot of doors that you thought are locked aren't. Olga's whole life was a testament to human potential. And the funny thing is, she didn't really see herself as remarkable. She'd say, look, if I can do this stuff, then you can too, because you're a wholly human prototype like I am. Olga saw God in a lot of people who didn't see him in themselves. She saw him in me. I'm honestly not sure she quite got the Unitarian thing, but she respected that I was on some kind of path that put kindness first, and that Jen and I were trying to raise the kids that way. She got that. Her own faith was pretty prescribed, but her spirit was supple. She knew there were a lot of roads to Rome. She knew it. Her birthday was just a few weeks ago. She would have been 96. So, Olga, daj Bože, cheers. You changed a lot of people's lives. You left behind a blueprint of how to live. You know, not the way, but just one way, but a damn good way. I raise a glass of pretend scotch to you. And now, just to finish up here, I want to leave you with something very cool. What you're going to hear in a second is a score composed by a young Scottish jazz musician named Paul Towndrow. He never met Olga, but he was beguiled by her story, and he composed a piece of music for her. And it debuted at the Commonwealth Games last year, and she never got a chance to hear it. But just as we go, it made me think, imagine what the musical score of your own life would sound like. Most of us won't get a chance to have it done for us. I think Paul Towndrow pretty much nailed Olga's trajectory, up and up and up and out. Let's just listen. Amen.